Welcome to Carl DeGregorio's Desk Session 81. We are now in the 80s, which means new thumbnail. I I come up with a new thumbnail every 10. And that's not exactly the way it's supposed to go from what I'm gathering about YouTube. But I'm learning, and also I'm doing something different, I suppose. And I don't mean that in any exclusivity way or any snobby way. I am not, I don't know how to put it. I want to be effective with any of my efforts. And in this data-driven scenario, effective would mean paid attention to, quote unquote. But there's some viral things and some techniques that I've yet to learn, and also don't know that I don't know if that's where it's at for me yet. And maybe at 100 is going to be a redesign, a reinvention, or a reconfiguration, or a lot of rere's. Meaning, if I were to have my druthers, and if this were to take on any kind of position of prominence or whatever, it's about, this is a very helpful thing for me. I am noticing, and I don't know if this is a big share or not, but like I am now noticing the impacts of the way I'm addicted to media, and how I am 2 and 3 screening. I mean, we're in the tournament, so the TV's on above my head, and that's probably, a little bit overstimulation, but it's tournament time. And during football season, I'll keep it on. And I'm aware of that now. I've gone back to doing paper crosswords. And like I said, it becomes a shared addiction in a way, because a few times that I haven't responded to phone calls and texts, because I have the phone always on silent and vibrate, but I'm doing something away from the phone. So sometimes using the laptop, or using, watching TV or whatever, the multi-screen thing can also be a way to combat particular phone addiction. And but people get tripped out because they assume you're that nearby, And if you're doing a crossword puzzle, or I understand now the impetus of getting back to paper books, that may be in my future again. I think I'd have to donate some books first to clear shelf space, so that I'm never stacking books in anything other than a bookshelf. That's full, and that's more of a design trick of making the books look suspended as a pile in midair, and that's why I love that bookshelf. It's not for an incomplete collection, in my opinion. So I have another bookshelf around the corner, and that is where I would sort of empty a shelf, select books that most of the time I don't reread, and sort of some of the real pulpy stuff, and I don't mean to disparage it, and pulp is probably denigrating. I read a level above that. And again, I don't read the great books unless I read what I want to read at any given time, and that was a great lesson. But this now is morphing into it's not that I'm sitting on a couch in a therapy session to talk to somebody to project my therapy sessions. I don't do that, because I try to keep things blurry in the personal stuff as much as possible, and that's just my version of being discreet and being I don't know, I was kind of raised formally, which made me very interesting to my peers. They just didn't understand the the picadillos I had drinking Perrier when I was not drinking beers at high school parties just to be a douche. That was different than what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I'm not a casual person. I believe one of the big reasons I can't stand MFers on speakerphone or even taking calls in public places like the gym or the store is I don't want people to hear the other end of the call. I can't control what someone may blurt out, or it's just private, and I don't understand how. Of course, if your phone is busted, some people's phones deteriorate, and like the earpiece has to. I don't know. I know that's the case for some people where the speaker's the only thing that makes it possible. But then that would be get some earphones, get some earpods, do whatever you got to do to keep. I just don't want my shit on blast, you know what I mean? And I don't understand why anybody thinks it's not only is it rude, but the real thing is it's none of your business, and I don't want to hear your shit, you know what I mean? But that's an over formality from a bygone era, and that's part of the rub of generational conflict and generational technologies and what's native to your what technologies were native to your youth. And again, I spoke last week about Gen X straddling multiple technologies, which is a good thing because we will adapt. The problem is it just feels like a constant source of like, I just got this stuff down and now it's obsolete. And I think that's happening for everybody. But if you grew up with it, I imagine you just don't even see it that way. It's just, it's just something you pick up. And so I wonder, who knows what the nostalgia will be for the 20-somethings today? Like, will they make jokes about like what versions of software or the iPhone 12? Remember that rickety thing? I don't think it's going to be that. And almost in a way, like nostalgia is one of those things that is now like a humble brag for, Gen X and beyond. And I find that a little, I guess, rich, basically, because it's a lot of posts about Gen X, the 90s, we were free reign, we were the last great generation to be able to blah, blah, blah. I think it's just nostalgia, and maybe it's just them lamenting the passing of their youth. And for the Gen Xers who have kids, it's like, why would you rub it in your own children's faces that their childhoods have been marred by these things that no longer pertain to their childhood, like riding bikes or being out in, not having social anxiety, not taking home your social status because of, Facebook and now TikTok, where you've opened the world up, to the scrutiny. I don't even know if they have small town heroes anymore, and that was a whole genre of writing, a whole epic songwriting. Springsteen would not have the narrative thrust of all of his early work about the loner, the loser trying to get out of the constraints of small town. Like those narratives of getting out, busting out of your hometown, or the glory days being the narrative of peaking too soon. If everybody's living online, it really homogenizes everything, and you don't even get to feel the sort of status of, it sucks, right? It sucks. It's like getting a lead in a play. You are the lead. You get to experience the weight of the role. You get to experience the volume of material, the fact that you're in every scene, the fact that you're have multiple songs to sing, the fact that you got to start at one place and end at another, the fact that you're at rehearsal every day, you can't just plug in. And so you get those experiences, and then when you hit the quote unquote real world, you become, in my case, a character actor, but you get that experience. And if everything is kind of beta tested in the world in front of people, it becomes I guess it dilutes things. And so then to have content creators saying, man, you'll never know what it was like. And to some degree, that's what my play is about. It is a lament, or not a lament. It's more of a gratitude for the fact that I didn't have to have video footage of me behaving poorly in the 90s, right? And I guess that's just the generational thing that gets me, boy, and hopefully if you figure some of your shit out, which is what, again, this is becoming for me, and whether that's a valuable thing to sit through is to be determined. It's helpful to me. So, and I do go on tangents, and which makes my editing a clip for the week very difficult, because I am circuitous, because I don't use a script. But that is also baked in the cake of why this is helpful to me. It's uninterrupted, meaning sometimes you do have friends and family that you chat with and you can get on a jag, but it's a give and take, and that's hopefully I'm better at that and not cutting people off. But when you're teeming with ideas, it's either you write them down or you express them out loud, or you sing, or you go to the gym, and I'm doing all that stuff to sort of process some of this stuff and to process it out loud. And as you heal or do what you need to do, some of these impetuses to be seen, to be heard, to leave a mark, to leave something behind, and that's healthy to some degree and part of youth. But at the same time, why is it so important to do this in front of people? But if I'm going to leave out all that as far as bagging on myself, what happens today, and I'm struggling because I can hear neighbors through the walls. And that's part of urban living. And, I have a concentration issues like we all do, or some of us do. And that's what I'm noticing about the phone. So when I sit at the desk session and do a desk session, the reason it's helpful to me is because it's an hour of not scrolling. It's an hour of being about sort of the best part of myself. So it's sort of like it's a jam session. If it would be like you're watching a singer and a guitar player and a songwriter trying to hash out song ideas. I'm hashing out ideas. I'm trying to have a theme. I try to start with a theme, but it goes by the wayside once I start talking, and once I start ruminating on the number, and then now the thumbnails and what I'm doing with YouTube, and if this is even the right place to do it, and what my skills moving forward in life are going to be. But also, if I am feeling that sort of AI creep, and that slop is creeping in, and thoughtful people are no longer, they're going to outsource, or they're going to go by the wayside. I don't know what my paranoias are. The fact of being able to keep attention on this, on sitting down for almost an hour, if that were that, or am I able to do that, is a preventative in a way, to stay on task, to set this equipment up, to frame, to do it on a steady day, and maybe and to have something to show for it. I guess obviously writing and having essays on a Substack kind of thing, that may be a more productive. See, that's the thing. To have written, it would be a lot more organized. The thought you would have to have a kernel of a thought. You couldn't have a ramble in an essay. And I did that on my blog for many years, and it didn't always. It didn't really. It gave me pressure, to be honest with you. And to write well, in and of itself, is pleasurable to read, but very difficult to write, in my opinion. And so when I'm being, what's the word? When I'm being encouraged to stick with the writing, or I know you're an actor, but you want to write because writing is the thing that you can control. And I hope it's not a fear of success or shunning my innate abilities, but it is very difficult, and not that. And I don't mean it in like there's just something that is age old. The best writers of our of our American experiment have had miserable. Hunter S. Thompson swallowed a gun. Hemingway swallowed a gun. Dylan Thomas died on a bar stool. So there is either a component to the type of person that ruminates enough to then put it to paper, depending on their era, and there is a component of maybe their own mental illness. They're not mutually exclusive, right? We've discussed that in The Artist Way. It doesn't have to be that way. And I don't romanticize these endings. I am using them as examples of there is something about that writing, being a writer, that is destabilizing to a degree that when people say you should just write, it's because they got to read finished product and be and if it was praiseworthy, even if you're just sharing with friends, and you get feedback and it's good, that is a short-lived feedback. And the grind and the ruminating and the self-doubt and the facing the abyss type of thing, which is part of what I think, and these were very successful writers that had bad endings. And I'm not trying to stave that off or stay in a safe lane. I'm just saying, and I have written my one-man show and it's yet to have been performed, but now, because I'm a performing artist, not just a writer, but I'm a performing artist, I have to, my unsettled nature now is it's written, it needs to be performed to finish its life cycle, and that's where my angst comes from. Hemingway and these guys, you know, they were entities and they're entertaining because of their stature, and they became celebrities. That's where their performing came from. My performing is the thing. And so that's why a vlog, a solo podcast, whatever this is, the death session, the byproduct of what I want to pour my heart and soul into is to be performed, to be spoken, not just to be written. And yet I don't go off a script here. So, and it's also to sort of be anti-AI. I even debate, I find myself editing for, it's a couple hours, maybe a few hours a week, and it's multiple days. Maybe it's more than that, because first I skim through the episode to see if I said anything quippy and if I have anything that might be punchy enough to just pull out in its entirety, and I seldom do. And what I've been doing lately is I've been stringing together long thoughts, and they have those jump cuts, and I'm sure it's because of my editing skill not being, and I'm not trying to pull anything over on anyone. It's just I'm taking out parentheticals. I'm taking out a side venue and a jug handle of thought that I don't need, and I'm not trying to write in quips or talk in quips. And I'm basically trying to counteract them. The idea that we've had this technology so long that only an old head would say something like this, but there will be quaint and old-fashioned internet content in the years to come. The fact that there's nostalgia for Atari is a great example of this. As these things pile in, and it's all whatever everyone wants to bag on it being low art, high art, that whole debate, there will be a nostalgia for, just like there is nostalgia, but also making fun of a punchline for years was, I'm a big star on MySpace, right? We have nostalgia for a failed social media, or not failed, but they've moved on. And so there will be a quaint notion of old YouTube videos or vlogs, can you remember when people, and who knows what it's going to look like, but there will be nostalgia, and eventually there will be, this is where it gets tricky, but there will be a high brow and a middle brow and a low brow version of what occurs online, I suppose. And I don't know. I've always joked that, I've debated about calling my book Middlebrow. I've debated about calling my play Middlebrow. I don't want to even say that title out loud on a thing, because someone else could take it and run with it. But Middlebrow being where I sort of sit in the pocket, and yet only someone who's middlebrow and self aware to any degree, or middle class in terms of depending on who you hang out with. Some of my notions are highfalutin to some people, and that's kind of where the internet brings this stuff all to a screeching halt. And so to discuss, to me, I am snobby about reality TV, I think that's garbage, right? And but I am a pop culture person, and I stay on pop culture. I've never wanted to sit through 8 seconds of The Bachelorette, but I will watch The Ultimate Fighter, which was essentially a reality show where they threw you a fight at the end of the thing. I watched, makeover shows where not like makeup, but like car makeovers, right? Like where they rebuild, or they rebuild cars they pull out of junkyards, right? American Pickers. That's reality too. And I don't know that they are stratified into any kind of middle to high. I don't think there's much highbrow reality. There's middle and low. But they are more part of the problem, I would think, in my opinion. Those unscripted shows are more part of the problem for our discourse, I think, than the internet. I think the internet is the delivery system. And so reality is the tobacco with the nicotine, and the tobacco with the tar, and the tobacco with the insecticides and poisons, and the delivery system of the computer, the phone, or the TV, the actual emotional carcinogen is the content, and the reality has had more to do with that, I think, because we took cues from that. We settled debates from that. We clipped out the flipping of tables and those things. And we see the before and after now. We don't even watch the process anymore. So even like a car makeover show, you just see the jalopy, and it's, and that's what the internet is doing. It's a delivery system. It's a one hit versus a bong, you know what I mean? It's an espresso versus a big tumbler of coffee, and it's those things that are really where it's at. And so, one of a reality show I dug was the F1. I've never sat through 10 seconds of a race in person. I never went to a drag race strip. I like sedans, you know what I mean? I like luxury hoopty cars. I fantasize about a Mustang sometimes, or a GTO. So I have those sort of guy, aspirations someday to have, a GTO or a Chevelle. But the F1, it's because of the production and the giving it narrative that, which winds up being a writing exercise that pulled me into these F1 storylines on a reality show. So I don't mean to bag on it. I'm just saying that probably has more, because then, nobody, as anybody, I don't know anybody who sat through The View. We see the clips, right? And so what I guess I'm getting to is I want to be somewhere in that middle brow to high brow. And my content, what I talk about, will inevitably be that. And maybe I got to figure it out, But then I also talk about pop music. And so who knows? But I want to be a corner of the internet where it's clear that you're seeing somebody work through this stuff. And those edits for the short clips are just, they are vexing. And it makes, I go through the emotions of good episode versus a bad episode. I can't even catalog. It's just not there yet. It's not archived enough. It's not well viewed enough for me to have, all podcasts have the top 5 episodes based on views, and those will be the ones that people can search, and that would be their entry point for the pod. Have you ever heard of this podcast? No. I don't usually start at the latest. I go back a little bit into the catalog and look for something that, and that's how it works out. And I wouldn't even know where to recommend you go for some of my better desk sessions. So, it's still a work in progress, but I guess it would be the continuum. I've debated with the length of time, and now I'm sharing process with you, and that's probably where I judge myself in the middle of it. But when I'm trying to do these clips is where, I sort of judge myself based on, did I come up with anything off the cuff that was soundbitey enough to make that editing task of the week by Tuesday easier to accomplish. And sometimes I try to look at it like I shoot these on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday is when I'm sometimes I'm still looking for the clip to put up on social. And other people would do that once you get monetized, and you can probably outsource it to AI to find the quippiest part. And I don't know how. I guess they use an LM, large language model, and once they have it digitized, then they can get a transcript, which is all amazing technology. The fact that I have closed captions auto-generated and they're very accurate, that's it's beyond the scope of what anyone ever thought their stuff would be. And here's where a Generation X thing, there was a VHS ability. There were camcorders back in the day, and they were approachable in price, and high schools had them, and I had, but I never had, somebody somewhere recorded the plays I did in high school on video, but we don't have them anymore. And they definitely weren't my side of the family posting, we just didn't know. It was all new, but we didn't adopt it to where we recorded anything. And that's the big lament of the 90s, 80s, 90s, is that, we don't have the archive of our youth, which is a blessing because we weren't exposed and we weren't neurotic and we had fun and all those things that are now like humble brags for a bunch of, Gen Xers sitting in their, expensive cars with who played it right and got money, and now they want to also weigh in on social media by humble bragging about how dope their youth was. I get it, and it was, and I think hopefully it shouldn't be a thing you should be making present day kids' childhoods fantastic, and and we all want to get. I don't have kids, so I'm not telling anybody how to be a parent. I just think it's not okay to humble brag about your youth as if it sucks now. And the fact that it sucks now, whose fucking fault is that? And that's too damn bad, to be honest with you. But what I'm saying is, I had submitted auditions via VHS tapes where you had to like copy them and mail them, and I got into a theater program at a different college because I missed the deadline or I flaked on the audition date. And I literally called the head of the department, and the dude said, send the tape. And I sent the tape, and he let me in for a BFA program and based on a tape. So technology and all that. But wouldn't it be something to still have that stuff? Or, God forbid it haunts you when somebody else who had it puts it up, And nowadays we aren't even, I try to do this in my house because for a while I was doing just sort of me chilling in my life and putting up videos, and people like them, but they would inevitably have people crossing in the background, and I just don't feel comfortable being that demonstrable in public. That is part of being formal, not being Gen X, but being raised by boomers and older than boomers, and that notion of public decorum is in my way of thinking. And so, and the fact that it's humiliating or it's embarrassing enough to basically have these attention-seeking performative things. They're always embarrassing until they become in demand. And, the Oscars just came by, and, I'm sure we all fantasize, and we've all written our speeches. But the idea that any of these people didn't want this, or the idea that, they just are, there's so few viral moments from a damn award show, and because they have to because it's a trade show, it's a company town, all it is an infomercial for the movies, and it's basically watching a sales, like, you wouldn't want to see salesman of the year for, I've worked parties in my bar where it was like the top salespeople from Mercedes-Benz, and there's a speaker and they hand out gifts, and it's fucking a train wreck of boredom. And you would think performers would have more of a dynamic award show, but it's the same shit as Daimler Chrysler handing out top salespeople award and getting a steak in a surf and turf dinner and a plaque. It's the same shit. And but what I'm saying is that does denote some success or unattainable or goals. And when you've gone to there's Oscar winners in my alumni, and plenty of Tony winners, and plenty of and so it becomes this thing that we've all thought about, but only previous to that, it's how many Gen Z sort of hipster youth stories set in Los Angeles, and they're like, they work for NPR. How many times are you gonna hear the joke of like, what'd you do last night? Oh, I had to break up with my boyfriend. Why? I had to go see a stage reading of one of his friends. Like, they make fun of these things that, a podcast is a humiliating, embarrassing thing to be going toward until it becomes the thing people are clamoring for. And that's just the thing you have to suffer as a performer, is that, we're not different. We're peers of people who are more quote unquote successful. And that's the hard part, is how long can you suffer those sort of indignities of anonymity? And then it's also the fine edge of be careful what you wish for, because some of the stuff is not pleasurable. You know what I mean? And why do it to yourself is, I guess, where I'm at now. And maybe that's fine. The final piece is like, why would I torture myself when it's already a torturous sort of endeavor? And finding ways that I have impeded myself, and or decided not to be happy because things on one facet of my existence aren't where I want them to be, but taking no stock in the things that are great about me and my life. And I guess if any of that is transmitted through the process of the desk session, and this is where I have to get used to a new agent in my company, and I have to get acquainted with them, and it's a transition that I don't particularly, I didn't ask for, but it's part of the life of agents come and go and people leave, and we're supposed to sort of connect and have a virtual meeting over FaceTime or Zoom. But in the interim, I said, let me do what I've read, or, be proactive. I sent an email kind of like bullet pointing some of the things, that we could get out of the way, and then just talk and see if we vibe, right? Because it's all just data points, right? But as you're describing yourself and you, what do you talk about? I say that I'm, 80 episodes deep into this, YouTube thing. Now, if you look at the numbers, she could say, fuck that. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. But if you were trying to hire somebody in the work ethic sense, 80 shows some commitment. It's a year. It'll be something more when it's 2 years, when it's 200 episodes, when it's 500 episodes. But we scoff at the aspirant sometimes, I guess, because we've seen so many Johnny-come-latelys, and then the people who hang in there, even if they don't succeed, are thrown into that heap. And I know one of the higher ups, a woman at the Nichols Fellowship, which is one of the most, if not the most prestigious screenwriting. The Blacklist is associated with that, but the Nichols Fellowship is this sort of, you submit to it with these scripts, and they're of such high quality that to win one of those is, I think, I don't know how many of them have been produced, but a lot of them have. And the only one off the top of my head that is was a screenplay that was submitted and then won the Nichols was, I think it's Mike Rich. Mike Rich is I think he's from Portland, Oregon. My brother even went to one of those dinners where you get to be in the same room and hear a speech. And Mike Rich is probably just trying to keep the checks coming in. And he's made a bunch of movies, The Rookie, but Finding Forrester was his big breakthrough, which is kind of been called like an urban Goodwill Hunting about a African American genius that is befriended by a J.D. Salinger type, and it was a killer script, but it's probably got issues in the new lens that is annoying to read these things differently, forgetting time and place and where culture was. But it's a famous movie, did well. It was produced, and that came from the Nichols Fellowship. And you see right here, I was just going to tell you a little quippy thing about the Nichols Fellowship and this woman who I saw on an interview, and that's where the parenthetical is. And so I would clip that out to get to this clip, I suppose, or get to this quote. But when you're interviewing short form and it's a little puff piece, the person said, what would you tell an aspiring screenwriter? What would you tell them? You're the Nichols Fellowship. You're the one who picks the winner every year, or what have you. What would you tell anyone? And she said, just finish a screenplay. Finish one. The minute you finish one, you are in a very, very select group of people who finish. And that has always been my North Star is, say what you will, I will finish, and I will continue, and I will persist, and I will leave a body of work, and I will type the end, and I will sit, and I will put the ass in the seat and face the blank page. And so just hearing that from her, and she didn't say you had to win a Nichols Fellowship, you didn't even have to, but to finish. And so, these are sort of small victories and things that I guess I'm hoping to find out what my motivation is as I get older, and as I, maybe think about what do I do about this new agent, and I have decisions to make about what's next and what the hell. And I guess I'm looking for the why, right? Because that's the thing a lot of headhunters and career counselors would say, what's your why, And I don't know what I'm chasing, but I guess I think I've over-invested in these skills, and pray that they will find a market, before, I lose the crop, essentially. But the why, I think it's less to do with notoriety or fame, for sure. And I'd like to just make a living being around the stuff I love, which includes books, which includes music, which includes acting, script writing. It's those are the things I love, and those are the things that I am indefatigable with. And I've yet to find a way to be around actors and these kind of things. So that should be, the hard part is finding out the what. And I found that out a long time ago, and maybe I've never made peace. But I am slowly but surely trying to make sure I remember one thing through the course of the week that I want to talk about. And it's not so much the theme, but the vivid image that came to my mind, which is what I might be chasing. And it's one particular moment, and it's a clue about who I am. It's a clue about where I was at a certain point, and it's either a reminder or a lament, and that's probably my decision how to take it, and then a reframe, because the minute you change an outlook, it can actually go in reverse. It doesn't change the past, but it will make you see the past differently. That is how you, they say, if you, after 18, you can't really blame your folks for stuff. And I wouldn't want to blame them for anything, but sometimes you do have to have clues, because if you have behaviors you can't understand, it can help. And this isn't a personal remembrance, but I am trying to fortify my resolve. And it's two things that are at play here. There's some noise going on back there. I don't know if you can hear it, but just crazy. But here are the two things. I was in drama school. It was my junior or senior year. I guess it was my senior year. And when you're in a BFA program, when you're at Carnegie Mellon, everything's gearing up for this presentation in New York. Now it's New York and LA, where you would get a chance to meet casting directors and agents. But there's also stuff to do your senior year. You're going to get a big, you're doing your shows and you're doing your classes, and you're kind of done proving yourself. So you can just sort of settle in and just, get your reps in and things like that. And there's two regional theaters in Pittsburgh. There's the City Theater and the Public Theater, and there's Civic Light Opera. It's a big enough city to have that kind of going on, and they're struggling to get butts in the seat because of the pandemic and the internet kind of creep and all that, and so they're struggling. But this is many years ago, and the City Theater relocated to a new place, a brand new, it was an old church, and they converted it into this theater, and it was beautiful, and we got to be the first. I kind of buried the lead there, but they were going to do their first production. Now, there was a playwright in the graduate playwriting program who had written this play. It did well. It was done regionally. I think it went to the Long Wharf or Louisville, one of those hives of new playwrights. Her name was Elvira Di Paola, Italian-American woman from Pittsburgh. And her play was Bricklayers, and it was about an Italian-American family of bricklayers in Pittsburgh. And it was this well-received play. They did a production of it in class, and I remember seeing it, and I remember who played what and who did what and all that. But Pittsburgh City Theater commissioned it to be their first play in their new space. And what had happened is that they would naturally look at, they needed a younger actor, someone to play, I guess 18 to 21, right? And they'd auditioned my buddy who was Italian-American. They'd auditioned a few people in the drama department, and it just didn't get back to me, and I didn't know. And then eventually, one of the professors who was a really good ally of mine and someone I could talk to honestly, he said, "Has anybody seen you, for Bricklayers? Are they aware did you go in for it?" And I said, I didn't even hear about it. And he said, "That's ridiculous." And so I got the audition for the young Italian-American who I was at the time, who I had, not a young one anymore. It was preposterous that I wasn't on the short list. Do you understand what I'm saying? I got to do the audition. I remember it fairly well. It's just like hitting all the moments, getting laughs, killing it. Your muscles, your chops are really high when you're, by the time you're a senior in drama school. Your chops are good. If you did something over the summer, I don't remember what I did over that summer. I might have, no, I don't know. I think I just worked in the city, but I remember vividly getting the call on a crummy phone that, you remember those phones that hung up, the whole front of it was the buttons, talking about technology, the whole, it hung up because of the button was this button on the very end of it was the receiver, or the hello, that hung it up. And you could also hang it up with your chin if you weren't careful. But it was I think it was brown, and it rang in my room, and I picked it up, and I heard I got the part, which I may have alluded to, but I got the part in, and what it meant at the time was I was a senior in drama school, and we were going to go to New York, and I was going to get a professional job, and it was at the City Theater, and it was being paid to do it in the real world. It was an equity show. I had the opportunity to get my equity card. There had been examples of people in that there is a local casting director. There were examples of people getting movie parts and not coming back because their careers took off. That happened a lot at Carnegie Mellon. I'm sure it happened a lot more at like SUNY, or it happened a lot more at NYU, places that were closer to New York. But people could get jobs because of how talented we were and how ready to work and how much more advanced our skill set was compared maybe to someone off the street. And so I got this job, and I was like in that level of actor that was like one of the people that were, I had to like get permission to leave a production of a show to do the professional show. I probably would have had to make the decision whether, if they didn't say go for it, that would have been a tragedy, and I would have had to decide to leave at that hour. And of course they let me do it, because that's the whole point. We were so close to then being, getting work in the real world. But I remember being in a room, and it was like the top floor of a house that they converted into apartments, and I got the call, and I just remember it, those when the frame, I guess they're called dormers, but the framing of a house, the roof can make these little nooks and crannies in your room, and they're slanted, and I remember hanging up and just being like, yes. And it was this, I can't even describe it. I better try though. But it was this feeling of these motherfuckers didn't even have me on the list, and then I wind up getting it. And then it was a professional gig. It was in the city. It was like a real acting job. And I was just so like, I did it. And I ran out of the room, and I told my roommate at the time, and we had this like jumping up and down, because it would have been better if it was a movie, sure, for fame and fortune and, notoriety and vision, but we were trained in the theater, and it was a theater gig, and it was going to be real acting, and everybody, it was dead on right for me and perfect. And it wiped away a lot of things that happened previous at school, where either because of my own shutdownness or what I perceived as slights, like it was saying to you, look what happens to the guy you gave a hard time to, look what he's up to now. It was a lot of vindicating, a lot of youthful, like, take that. And so it had a lot baked into it, but really it was just like, it was a damn job, and it was going to be a long rehearsal. It was going to be a long run. It was going to be an equity card. It was like I gave myself a graduation gift, and it was going to set me up to go to New York with an equity card and a professional credit. And it was also like I had something to celebrate, something to call home with. It was like the promise of, boy, you're sending your kid to do this thing, and how the fuck is that going to pay off? And it was paying off like before I even left the little nest of that. And I guess I've been chasing that feeling. I've had gigs since, I've done shows since. I just never had that feeling of like it felt like a touchdown, it felt like like a score and a goal in a fucking World Cup match. It really, because it just what was tied up in it, and the timing of it, and what it represented. And it was and it got reviewed, and the reviews were pretty good, at least for me. And it was a wonderful thing. And it's not that I'm chasing that memory. I am chasing that maybe it'll never be as sweet. That's what they say about the first, feels like the first time, or the idea that, we were chasing the dragon after that first hit, and hopefully there's something bigger and more life-changing, but I look forward to that, feeling. And then I got to do it, and it was like a sustained feeling of being, doing what you love, being paid for it, setting you up for future endeavors. And, that I have to remind myself can happen again, has happened since, but what happens is what do you do in between? How do you keep your life happy? And I that's the big question. And I don't know that I always took care of that notion of, why would it have to be an external to make me feel that way, And so, I think about it, and And it just was a thing that crossed my mind, because I don't even think so much about doing the show. Although I do remember, the set and all. It was just the best. It was all the best, right? Taking the bus to rehearsal, being like excused from the things I had to do at college to go and be like a professional actor, and the paychecks, when your folks are still paying the bills, like your paycheck was like, it felt like a prince's ransom. It wouldn't be enough to take care of things, in the real world, but it took care of me then. And I'm just sort of trying to live in what was sort of clicking for me at that point, and how to get back to that. But also, to not always have to, there's a great line in Death of a Salesman. Biff, who is, I guess they say the first depiction of a depressed male. The young son, the prodigal son, returns. Willy Loman is just kind of got these delusions of what life may look like for his son. His son's been estranged. He hasn't really come home in a long time, and he's kind of like an itinerant laborer. And he basically says to his dad, "Pop, I'm not bringing home any awards, and you got to stop waiting for me to bring them home," Basically, these great expectations, thrusting all these hopes and dreams on his kid, it just beat the kid down. And then you're not winning spelling bees, or you're not winning All-State, and all these things that you get in your youth. Like he grew up, and he's just out there working, and he's basically trying to tell his dad, like, stop expecting greatness from me. And in a twisted way, and I read another book about male depression, what he's saying to his dad is like, you shouldn't need that to love me. And that's the big tragedy of Death of a Salesman, is that we miss it, we miss it in these pursuits. And so the reason I go back to that moment in my dreams and memories is because that was a high. It was a high point where so much came together in one confluence. And you can't live on that high wire your whole life, but you can have more joy, more presence, enjoying life without having the grandeur of these bringing home these damn prizes. And you got to love yourself, and hopefully you can heal knowing that you were worthy, whether you got that part or not, And any of the people who read for that play that didn't get it, like, should they have felt like shit? Because I would have felt like shit, and I would have simmered. And anyway, I needed to learn these things, and it's taken me a long time. And so hopefully I just still like doing this stuff, and it's more like I'm eager to get to that next one, because those feel good, and those are good days, and then you move on, and hopefully you can build on it. But I'm kind of learning these things late in life that, just like him saying, he's not saying I'm not going to try. He's just saying you should love me whether. And that's what the book about male depression is. The tragedy that Willy Loman is he shouldn't own, his love for his son shouldn't be in the prizes he brings home. It should be in the mere fact that he's your son, and we're all born beautiful. If you believe in the God above, everything is already present, and time is not linear, right? Whatever they say. And unconditional love is whether the kid brings home prizes or not, and that then is a reflection on you, work on you. I got to work on myself to be worthy in my own eyes, and not need an equity card, or not need a, and does anybody mention that, when they get to an Oscar, and you would think that these people are healed, and then you find out that far from. Far from. How could you want more attention than you're getting as a movie star, as a person? And this stuff can be bottomless, and it can leave you very bereft if that's how you define your worth. And so I show myself my worth by showing up for myself at Death Session, and things I've written, and the auditions, and a million things that happen behind the scenes that aren't that get to be opening night, or check me out on TV, or likes on social media. And maybe some of those things can be personal. The birth of a child is bigger than an opening night. I'll tell you that's true. Child graduates college. That's bigger than opening night. And I think, unfortunately, I may have gotten that wire crossed, but also sticking in there with somebody you care about. Though these are all victories that aren't so binary. You know what I mean? They're not box checking, and yet we all have to come up with a resume to prove our worthiness. And it makes for a very degenerated view of what's valued and what's valuable. And that's part of what AI will never experience, the sheer joy of having auditioned and called back and getting the part and like celebrating on the phone. And you couldn't even hang the damn thing up because it was one of those shitty free fucking Sports Illustrated phones or whatever. And I got to almost bash my head against the wall. And I just remember going like, yes, I went, it was spontaneous. It felt, victory. I did it, and then I got to go and do the show. I got to rehearse. I got to do all the trappings. I got to get the pats on the back, be the BMOC, and I hugged my roommate at the time. And, hopefully he meant it, it didn't matter. I was kind of on my way, and to say that I haven't, there's the many notions that have crossed my mind. And if anybody asks, at least I'm doing better. When people ask me what's been going on, I'm still in it to win it, and that's my victory. It's just, you need a few wins, and we're so damn close. We're going to make them. Sometimes they gotta be of your own making. And I guess that's what I'm talking about. And, I don't share that out of any humble brag. I share that that's the feeling I'm after. And it's possible. If it's happened once, it can happen again. And and that's the nature of faith. And maybe sometimes disappointment is unrealistic expectations, or, putting it so far out of reach, it's impossible for anybody. But there are steps. And so I guess it's just taken me a long time to kind of come to terms with that. But I think that's about what we're going to talk about on this 81st desk session. We did last week, we put the song up last week, Choose by Color Me Bad. And this is another thing I like to remember, the segment that I end with. This is all part of keeping my memory, my cognition, staving off brain rot, things like that. We talked about Color Me Bad last week. Choose. That's the video you're going to get this week in the description. It's a jam. It is actually, I didn't mention it, but it is Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And I went back to back with Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis songs. I just like that sound. It's why I vibed on Janet Jackson so much. It's really their production is what really was the sound of the 90s for me. And but this week's song is a throwback to a more classic rock. The song on the next on the list is I Think I'm in Love by Eddie Money. Now, I think it's late 70s, maybe it's early 80s, probably early 80s, but before like 80s hair metal and before the sort of second British invasion. There's this little pocket that's a little bit 70s into 81, 82, 83, anything before 84 is like John Cougar. Is still like in that classic rock tip, white guy stomp the dominance. MTV came out I think in 82, and they didn't put a lot of R&B artists on, or any, so there is this weird pocket, and Eddie Money is in this weird pocket, and he had a lot of radio hits, a lot of jukebox hits, and I Think I'm in Love is one of his hits, but not the everybody says Take Me Home Tonight, everybody says I Want to Go Back, everybody says Shakin', like those are the big Eddie Money hits. But I Think I'm in Love, it's very up tempo. Baby Hold On to Me is my favorite Eddie Money song. And Eddie Money was a guy named Eddie Mahoney. He was a New York cop, an actual cop, and he left the force to change his name to Eddie Money and became a singer, and he's a saxophone player. He was a saxophone player. So it's very New York. But this song, I Think I'm in Love, is like it would be probably benefit from being remastered. Just bring up the levels because it's so it's such it's literally sounds like adrenaline, and it's just a punch in the face, but it's also I Think I'm in Love, and it's just got this pulsing thing and this dueling guitar thing, and it's one of these. I hate to say this because I'm done with that, and I hope I was done with it long ago. But he was outside of the. I don't think he's even a whisper of being considered for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He is outside of all chic trends, you know. And I hate to call anybody that successful B-list, because I shudder to think what the hell I would be if he could call Eddie Money B-list. But he was outside of the. He was not well reviewed. He was not well. I guess the analogy would be like a John Grisham compared to a Philip Roth. He was not. He was more of a John. He was a lunch pail, blue collar guy, just good rock and roll, good R&B based rock and roll with big hits, and a superstar. So he was so big, but he was almost. I've talked about this playlist being not hits, because why would I ever have to hear Hotel California on my own time again? It's literally you know the lyrics as well as you know the Star Spangled Banner, is how ubiquitous and de rigueur these songs were. So Eddie Money was like kind of below that, even though he was big hits, and his hits for me wouldn't be the one I would show or display to anyone to sort of the sound. But I Think I'm in Love is like, you know, it's just and My Luck's Looking Up. It's got great lyrics. It took me, you know, I joked last week about, you know, Janet screaming Minneapolis. I didn't know what the fuck he was saying until you get the lyrics on. Another thing is you only got the lyrics in a cassette, right? And you'd have to unfold the thing and read it, you know. But if you weren't buying that cassette, and Eddie Money wouldn't be someone I'd buy. But when you have the library available to you because of the massive database that is, you know, essentially, you know, that's what AI is, right? It's everything. It's the library of, you know, Congress in your phone for music. And so you can look up Eddie Money lyrics. And so he says, I think I'm in love and my luck's looking up. I had no idea what the hell he was even saying. And I have fond memory. I worked in a restaurant with a dude who was a really good musician, and to get through these brutal nights and just to sort of survive, we would do like Name That Tune based on the guitar riff, you know, and it would start out pretty simple, you know, we do like Tom Sawyer, and we try to stump each other. And also it's really hard to like hum string instruments, you know, a guitar riff. But we would we would talk about Eddie Money a lot, and he would his favorite part is at the end he does this like little like he's feeling it so good, and he kind of speeds up the tempo, and it's almost like he's scat singing at the end, and a lot of great songs in the 80s. Some of the best riffs and some of the catchiest parts were on the fade out, and you're just like sitting there going, no, that's how they make you feel like you don't want the song to end. And so Eddie Money, I Think I'm in Love, it's just a great rock stomp. It's almost The King of Queens, which was a very successful CBS series with Kevin James and Leah Remini in the 90s. There was a sort of running gag that he's such a regular Joe guy, the Kevin James, Doug Heffernan character, you know, that he was like a Mets fan and the King of Queens and a blue collar Joe, and his favorite artist was Eddie Money and they even had some cameos with Eddie Money, and he had like this. I remember being at a karaoke bar, and like young kids 20 years younger than me, he had this weird kind of what's really kind of organically happening with this sort of nostalgia and also just the ubiquity of songs and things being good no matter when they came out. Like a lot of young kids who are now probably in their 30s, he had like a real resurgence with, Gen millennials kind of got into Eddie Money because he was dope. And so that's the next one on the list. I Think I'm in Love by Eddie Money. And I persist and I continue, and I try to keep it on the up foot. And I'm going to the gym and I'm doing what I got to do, and I'm looking to celebrate. And so I would say for the week to think about those moments of exaltation that I hope you've all had plenty of, and plenty more will come. And to never forget that what really can make you feel good is to be proud of yourself, and to be proud of taking joy in other people's accomplishments too. And and I guess when you work on yourself and you don't need extra because you didn't get enough, that's when you can really start to celebrate. And that's when the snowball, Dave Ramsey talks about the debt snowball. You get the lowest one, you pay it off in full, and then you start this debt snowball and the momentum. But I think that presence of gratitude, grace, and euphoric celebrating, if you can get more grounded in your day-to-day between those moments of victory and defeat, and you raise your basement emotional level up to a little bit higher, then that's where celebrating other people's victories is a good thing. But also that it really does help your momentum, honestly. If you can truly be happy for someone else's success, I think that just starts a snowball of good energy and a way for you to be resilient. So even if it were me saying to you, celebrating someone else's victory, I've heard people say that literally, and I don't know if I agree with this, but being able to celebrate, even if it's something normally you'd be a little envious of, if you can actually celebrate the victory of someone else, that I've heard people say that literally it helps you, like almost like a direct dividend, like the cosmically or in the universe, you are saying, even if you're faking it, that if you celebrate someone else's victory, now that may be too far a thing, but someone whose spirit is enlivened enough to see it, feel it, and then to actually outwardly express celebration for others, that just means you're in a good place tuning wise, minimally. And so maybe it's not an exact, like, I say yay to the dude, but if you mean it, that means you've lifted some of that pain out of you. And that's where I want to try to get to, because then you can start to work on just stuff you got to fix. And then maybe you can open yourself up to future successes because you've had them before. So, maybe think about that over the week, and crank some Eddie Money and some fucking Color Me Bad and things I thought I'd never say, because those weren't the hipster music choices when you were trying to impress, dark-hearted goth chicks back in the day. But yeah, listen to some Color Me Bad and listen to some Eddie Money, and have a good week. Peace.